Greetings, Ranger fans. Jake here for another edition of Database Rangers Power Reviews, where we take a look back on our classic episodes of Database Rangers Power Reviews as we count down the 100 weeks to the 100th and final episode. So thank you to everyone already here. Welcome Jenny, welcome Lex, welcome Chris, welcome Nightwing Josh. Good to see you all. It has been a busy week. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone who celebrates. And an honorable day of mourning for anyone mourning the loss of various indigenous populations. Obviously, a weekend of many mixed feelings for many people. But I hope that you have been able to have good times with your families this week, and that everyone is doing well. Welcome, Scott. Yeah, I've been busy trying to get the ball rolling again on 95. I'm making good progress. Not as much as I would like, but I have been making good progress. Obviously, with Thanksgiving, there were other things to concern ourselves with, along with a few other responsibilities between home and work. The really unfortunate thing is that although at the beginning of this month I was feeling like I was within 2 weeks of finishing the episode, I was only in that position because so many things had gotten pushed to the end of the month, and now we're in the end of the month, so all the things that I was supposed to be doing after the episode was done are now happening while the episode is being completed. So that's creating challenges. I'm hopeful that within the next few days I should be able to give you guys some more concrete news, especially now that I've managed to get things together on the main big special effects sequence that is the biggest challenge of 95 outside of just filming with people. But yes, RJ had a great time with Thanksgiving. We went to go see some grandparents, and so RJ got to stuff their face with stuffing, turkey, cranberries, mushrooms, all that good stuff. They've gotten very good at eating their meals, and we're very proud of them. It's hard to believe that we're coming up on a year soon. So it's been a wild year, and it's hard to believe that we're getting already so close to the end of the year now. It is my sincere hope that I can still get 95 out before the end of the month, but it is definitely going to take some long nights and a lot of hard work. It is coming along though, and the effect that I was working on today and finally getting some polish on is looking very good, I think. I'll put it this way. It's looking in a number of ways better than I anticipated. So I'm going to keep polishing that, keep continuing throughout the rest of the sequence. Hopefully I'll be able to get a lot of work done tomorrow. But yeah, so that's where we're at with 95 on Thanksgiving, and just outside of that, life in general is just busy as ever. But I appreciate all of you joining me and taking times out of your busy schedules for these weekly live streams. I hope that we can continue to bring in more people to join us as we go through these commentaries, and sort of build up hype as we go into the final episodes of the series. I am still very much hopeful that we should be able to hit that big final goal of getting the final episode out on the 10-year anniversary. That's been like the singular big goal that I've been working towards this whole time, and I think that we can do it. Welcome, Athena. Good to see you. All right, so all that said, let us not forget our 3 equally non-controversial phrases. So, number 1, say it with me, chat. Black lives matter. Number 2, say it with me, chat. Fascism is bad. And number 3, say it with me, chat. Superheroes are fun. So let's dive into another adventure with our favorite superhero, Database Ranger, in episode 54 of Database Ranger's Power Reviews, the second part of the Winter Trilogy, reviewing Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue, episode 23, Yesterday Again.
Previously on Power Review.
Here we go.
Farewell, Ranger fans.
Oh, Athena, sorry to hear that you're sick.
And welcome to year 2. My name is Dr. Dayspace. The good doctor
Oh,
and I
year
will be
2.
celebrating the new
The
year
year 2
with a good
premiere was just
old-fashioned
so...
kickoff party.
in
You guys could say that I'm the landlord here.
I really wanted to kick things off in a very big way with this one.
You're not me!
I'd say the year 2 premiere was
Oh.
in many ways bigger than the year 3 premiere.
Well, maybe next year. Until then,
You know, seeing as how that was a
fans.
double episode and the only double episode that we've ever actually done.
Let the power protect you. And now, Database Rangers Power Review.
I always feel bad that when I'm inconsistent with my coloration.
And welcome to year 2.
And here we go, cycling through again with Welcome to Year 2. Fortunately, this portion of the episode was very easy to write. I just copied and pasted. Except once again, we don't have anyone there.
Still working on that.
This was just such a fun way to start off the new season with these, with the the holiday episode and then the year 2 premiere, and then this episode really just kind of bypassing a lot of expectations in terms of where you would think the series was going, and instead just sort of hitting a big reset button, except nothing's quite right. And so we then hit the reset button again, and as we'll see, we'll be hitting it again once more.
You know what? Well, all of this feels really familiar. Like if you ever had really bad deja vu,
and
you've lived this.
One thing that's interesting with regards to Database being able to perceive these things as he keeps going through the time loops, which again parallels with the Phantom Rangers' immunity to certain temporal effects, as we saw when time freezes. But this was such a gimme in terms of episodes to cover, because this episode really did the time loop very well, and I wanted to play around with that perception as far as my ideas for how the new season was going to start. Now, with regards to when I was planning out which episodes I was going to review, I'm fairly certain that I had this one in mind before I even thought of doing Island Evolution or Rangers in Reverse. Just because I knew I wanted to play around with the idea of hitting the reset button for the beginning of the new year, and there was really no better episode that was a better fit for the whole time loop idea than Yesterday Again. I wouldn't say that it's the best example of that concept. I think probably one of the best examples of the Groundhog's Day loop was actually in the TV show Haven. If you ever get a chance to check that out, they have a fantastic Groundhog's Day loop episode that I really, really enjoy. It's a heartbreaker of an episode. Which really makes me wonder why Carter is the one testing out this experimental new aircraft. We also, and again, I'm still trying to figure out why Carter was selected to lead the team and not, I don't know, the person who is supposedly been. Yeah, Carter, as much as he, as much as Carter is a good solid character and has been praised as a as you know, a great Red Ranger, it is a little odd that he was put in charge of the team without any actual experience with the organization. He does definitely have natural leadership ability, though.
Dana and Chad help her clean up the mess as Carter and Joel head down to the testing center.
But I do like how, you know, they have these very defined moments, which are necessary to establish this sort of time loop sequence. Well, welcome, Dan.
Unfortunately, this is where things start to go bad, as not only do Carter's engines start
I'm not sure which video game that is.
But Queen Banshira's spoiled son Olympius has begun attacking the city with a horde of batlings and his latest monstrous creation.
I do like how every now and again Power Rangers will just play around with a classic sci-fi trope and just make that be the premise of an episode. I feel like we don't get enough of that. I think, you know, we do get the personality switch or the mind switch episode as a pretty standard stock plot pretty often, but not too many other examples in recent times.
Who summoned the rescue bird to give
outside, I'd say maybe Rewriting History was a really good one in Beast Morphers, where they played around with the idea of a what if scenario and made it tie into the plot really well.
Carter is racing to the scene, but still having trouble.
And yeah, that is fair. Wild Force was was definitely had a worse reason for Cole to be leader, with the whole thing of him just happening to be the one chosen by the Red Line. It is always a little awkward when the Red Ranger is not the person with the best experience.
I don't think that's going to work. And sure enough, that's gotta hurt. Guys? Come on, guys. Well, I'm sure they're just resting. Clearly distraught over what he's just seen on his vid screen.
One of the nice things with episodes like this, as far as what I get to play around with, is it's still very much in the review format. And he's breaking out even faster than the previous time.
Greetings, Ranger fans,
and just again, snap to reset.
And welcome to year 2. We've got a lot of big plans in store.
And I just keep using the same speech and just pieces of it falling apart.
But I'm sure we can still have a kickoff party.
This was just really fun to play with Database just having no real idea what's happening to him.
Because I'm getting like Yogi Berra levels right now. So let's just forget about
referencing, of course, Yogi Berra's famous quote of "It's deja vu all over again."
Yesterday again. We start off with the Red Ranger recovering from an advanced training simulation to test out Bandai's latest merchandise.
I will say, when I first thought of this whole concept for the beginning of year 2, I thought of this one while I was still in the early stages of year 0. And it wasn't until towards the end of year 0 that I actually decided on the landlord's identity. I knew that I was going to have the character of the landlord, but his identity actually wasn't one that I had decided until I was done with year 0. When I worked out what year 3 was going to be. This is also just such a fun way to do a review. To have the reviewer character literally experiencing the same time loop with the characters.
Wait. It's a chili dog, isn't it? Because it was a chili dog.
Hey, how'd you know?
Because he ate Laffy Taffy as a child, and now I think I understand why Dana.
It's so much fun. a database is kind of reviewing an episode from the middle, and is a little bit thrown off by all that.
And not wanting to experience another disaster.
I had the landlord's identity planned out well in advance. I would say by the time I was on like maybe the 10th episode of Power Reviews, I knew how it was going to end, and so the landlord's identity was very much tied into that. I'd say the only elements that I didn't really have heavily planned out before year one started was I wasn't entirely sure how the middle of year two was going to go. A few bits, because I had ideas on the beginnings and the ends, but not quite exactly the path to get there. With some similar bits of when it came to year three as well. I was still working out a few of the details. By the time that I got into, well into year two, though, I had the details of year three pretty well worked out.
This is the second half of the episode. I can't believe it. What? It's fine. It's fine. Let's just keep on going. So, long story short, that wasn't a simulation.
I still have no idea how the time travel mechanism of this episode operates. It's so bizarre. And of course, the acknowledgement of the super creepiness of the previous episode with Database and all his doppelgangers.
Left with no other choice, he hopped back in the driver's seat and jets off in the suddenly much more mobile armored vehicle, which I guess was repaired with the power of self-confidence. Once again, Olympius has managed to snag the Unilaser with his demonic tractor beam. But just
I do get into my critiques of the episode. I appreciate the format. I'm always a fan of the format, but there's definitely some issues in terms of how this episode is put together.
But thanks to Jinxer and his magic cards of magic down the Skull Cavern, this fight's not over just yet. Okay, the rhyming is making things seem really familiar again. With Manteevil back in the game.
Another acknowledgement of Quagmire from Island of Illusion. It's great having all these little bits sort of bleed into the review, while still having a very solid situation for him to be doing a review in. Which is really the big challenge as the show goes on, was integrating the reviews properly into the story. And episodes where, it's very obviously a review with the with the framing device surrounding it, have always been the easiest ones to write. Probably the only real example of that I've had in year had from that recently would probably be 92, where we had the whole Landlord and DB review, which had its own oddities because I was reviewing a very fourth wall breaking episode, and that has its own challenges when it comes to writing.
Not only is the time travel element never explained, it doesn't actually end up making a bit of logical sense. As Carter is set right back to his past self,
here's the thing with the Landlord resetting DB. It's not that it's an actual time loop. It's more of a memory erasure. Database's memories are repeatedly being rewritten by the Landlord. It's an attempt at manipulation, but unlike in Yesterday Again, where there's literal time travel, Database just keeps having these little short memory wipes. And that's why the episode was still sort of midstream when he went to go continue reviewing it. Also, otherwise, just from a structural perspective, we would have just kept reviewing the same portion of the episode, which would have been a little silly.
Piloting the vehicle are the
Um,
focus of the story. We aren't really learning anything new about him or seeing him grow as a character, largely due to the ill-defined manner in which he ultimately achieves his goal.
I try to work within what I consider reasonable extrapolations of character powers from the show. And although, the landlord's alternate identity, as we have discovered recently, never actually engaged in direct memory wiping, memory manipulation was still a common strategy of his, even if it was through the use of his agents within the series. Have I ever had DB try to rock the cowboy hat? Unfortunately, no. I don't happen to have a cowboy hat on hand. I could probably borrow one from my dad, because he's performed country music for years. But I do not happen to own a cowboy hat, as much as it would be appropriate for this episode.
This is exemplified well in the memorably goofy and melodramatic scenes in the cafeteria. Overall,
That slow motion rollerblading.
But despite its many flaws, the strong sense of concept and the use of reiterated events does at least make it memorable. And I think that's something I really need right now.
He needs to be able to remember.
I think I'll start.
Yeah. And here we go.
You remember me. Wasn't easy. It's all still in bits and pieces, but
And here we go.
whatever you're doing, it's not working anymore. Well, it took you long enough. And I suppose we are long overdue. Who are you?
It has been a long time since they've talked.
Don't you recognize me? I'm you. But first, I like it.
And we will be playing around more with these word choices being made by the landlord here.
I am your subconscious. What are you talking about?
He speaks very much in metaphor, but there are a few bits that are just very misleading. And it was fun to play around with the whole Jungian analysis that Database engaged in the very earliest episodes of Power Reviews. And this little sequence here I loved doing, because I just slowly creep towards the camera, but I'm not walking in a usual sense. I'm gliding almost.
Or a doctor. Whatever it is.
And this whole sequence is very personal. This was very much kind of cutting to the core of my own personal self-doubts.
I'm just a fanboy. A delusional little fanboy.
He's trying to reinforce this identity that he's built for Database. And then this was also, me playing around with the split screens and all that.
Save the world. Let me tell you
And the story. And once again, just constantly reframing the series again and again and again in terms of what is real and what isn't. And yeah, Scott, you just spotted again the darkness on the computer monitor.
A lonely little girl from his favorite TV show.
And this is just like such a, this is like a reasonable premise for what Database experienced.
Just like that cute little girl who lived out the lonely little
And it's framed as a story. So again, the landlord doesn't really lie. If you pay very close attention to how the landlord operates, he's never fully lying. He's almost always either speaking in metaphor or using just very precise wording on what he's talking about. Like, this is all framed as a story, and so it doesn't need to be the truth. And as far as his counterpart in the television series, you know, he's not someone who actually tends to lie. He'll mislead characters, but he doesn't flat out lie to them, and I like playing with that. The idea of a villain who tells you the truth, but only a version of the truth to an extent, and knows how to cut to the core of what your doubts are and who you think you should be or could be. I've had a lot of doubts over the years over how much of my life I've dedicated to this franchise, and I still do. But it's still something that's important because it's what has allowed me to interpret the world. It has given me a framing device for the world.
That's not right. He had stayed inside all day long.
And I love how many people were so creeped out by the landlord. Just the soft-spokenness. I feel bad because I deliberately kept the apartment like a total mess for a few weeks to allow enough stuff to build up for these sequences. I had, and this was all filmed before episode 50. All of these little shots here, you see where Database is screaming and he's got the long hair. Like, this was filmed for 44, but we only saw a brief glimpse of it. And all these other bits, I had to pile up, bags of recyclables. And I needed to make sure to film all this before I got my haircut at the end of episode 49. And then that last little sound effect with the closing of the book, I very much like. That was very much like a layered effect where I did the closing of the book and it didn't feel like it had enough oomph to it, so I layered it upon itself in post to pump up the volume and create a little bit of an echo, just to give it that extra ooh, and play around with this as if this could have been basically the beginning of the end of the series. But yeah, this was a sequence that was planned out pretty far in advance, because if you notice, during that whole, what we later find out is genuinely a flashback sequence to when Database was trapped in the original version of the apartment, you'll notice how long my hair is in all of those little flashback sequences compared to the length of my hair throughout the rest of the episode. Because a bunch of little bits of 54 and 55, all those bits where Database is just broken and shattered and we're seeing those flashbacks, I had to film before the end of episode 49 because I was getting that haircut with the demon and the portal. And yeah, you're right, Scott. Ironically, Darkness did end up predating Edge of Darkness as an arc word for Phantom. That is true. But yeah, I love that. Yeah, there's like on our TV tropes page, I believe that my performance as Landlord was listed under Nightmare Fuel. I felt very good about that performance. It tapped into a lot of self-doubt that I've grown up with and experienced over the course of my life. Um, especially like the nods of you could have been a businessman, you could have been a doctor. Um, you could have done all these different things if you hadn't been wasting your time on this TV show. And that that's a difficult thing to sort of reconcile, how much we allow for our engagement with a franchise to dominate our lives. And it's something that I've had a lot of trouble coming to terms with over the years. And a big part of that is, or has been, understanding that I function on the autism spectrum. Like, I see the world in a different way. I require a lens through which to interpret things because of that fixation and special interest. And, I had to come to terms with, okay, this is something that is okay for me to fixate on to an extent. So long as I'm using it as a gateway towards other expressive outlets and towards learning more about the world, and not just allowing it to be a pure fixation, which it definitely was for quite some time. As much as Power Reviews as a project has dominated far more of my life than I would like, just my fixation on the show itself was very intensive for quite some time. Specifically towards the end of high school, I did actually stop watching Power Rangers for a full year following Power Rangers Wild Force, because I felt like my obsession with the show had gone too far. Just in terms of, I was always reading Wikipedia articles and rewatching episodes and obsessing over trivia and memorizing things. And it was making it difficult for me to focus on other things and sleep properly and things like that. And it was not fully healthy at that time. And I feel as though it has become healthier over time to an extent, while at the same time I recognize that I have probably not been engaging in the healthiest habits with my fixation on Power Reviews itself. It has transferred a little bit from a general interest in the franchise to a specific focus on this project that I am working to kind of extricate myself from by finishing. It's just been a big push there, but it can be tricky to cope with the whole thought of missed potential and who you could have been if you had made different choices in life. And when I was in college, I was in an accelerated PhD program. Now, I do not currently have a PhD, and a big part of that was because during my time in the program, I was going through some personal stuff, and I was experiencing a fair amount of situational depression at the time. And so I ultimately decided that I needed to cut something out of my life for my own mental health. And I realized that it had to be that PhD program. And it's because I realized that's not where my passions were, it's not where my head was at, and it was not good for my mental health to be trying to force that. And that's one of the things that I've sort of come to terms with whenever I get those doubts of, oh man, I could have been like a research scientist. I could have been a physicist. I was on that track. But, I had all these other things in my life. Was I too focused on spending time with the theater, or was I too focused on, Power Rangers things? Had I allowed myself to become too fixated on a children's television program? And I've since realized that I wouldn't have been happy forcing myself into those other paths. As much as any of us can say to be, truly happy. Like, obviously, I've got stress in my life. I'm frequently exhausted because I'm often overwhelmed. But there's, I think, far more satisfaction in finding the path that worked for me, rather than trying to follow the path that I felt like I should have been on. And that's what a big part of that conversation with the landlord is about, and a big part of what he as a villain is trying to tap into. He is kind of playing into that whole thing of the shadow archetype. You're defined by the things that you are not. And it gets you thinking about the path that you could have gone down, and that, to a certain extent, I was very close to going down. I did ultimately decide that I would be better as a teacher than a researcher, and I do enjoy teaching, as, again, stressful and as it may occasionally be, as it is a lot of hard work. But when you find things that are a good fit, it feels natural. And that's a challenge. And yeah, Josh, theater jobs are tricky, and I do not envy you in the current environment with how the theater industry has certainly been suffering in the wake of the pandemic. So I'm sorry that you've had to deal with that. I don't know if you do the acting side of things or the tech side of things. I've always kind of been a mix of both, as you can kind of gather by how I've done this series. But it's challenging. I was during the first few during like a few months there, after I graduated college, right after MJ and I had moved in together, I was still looking for work, and I was trying to get a job as an animator, which unfortunately never actually panned out. But during the first few months, I was working as a theater tech at a local professional theater. Although I sometimes feel like I should put professional in air quotes, considering how they actually treated their workers. But unfortunately, I actually was injured on the job, and that's how I ended up getting trapped in retail shortly thereafter. You may have noticed in the background of this episode, there was a Kohl's shopping cart, and that's because I had worked at Kohl's for quite some time, and I had borrowed a shopping cart that was damaged that I had promised to fix. Unfortunately, I was let go from Kohl's, and it was before I had gotten around to fixing the cart. So that cart actually lived in our apartment for like 2 years before we finally got rid of it. And it was just sort of like we used it as sort of our recycling bin. As you saw, with it sort of piled up with the bags. Although I did eventually actually repair it and return it. Long after I'd stopped working there, I did return it. But I actually said that yes, I'm gonna get rid of it. I want to keep it for this one shot where I just can have a bunch of junk piled high. It would be really helpful for conveying the piled high junk, and then I'll get rid of it. So that was kind of funny. Oh, congratulations on getting uh, an excellent rating at your district's acting performance. Um, oh, that is unfortunate and ironic that you actually got so that you pushed for such a level of realism. They actually thought that you were overexerting yourself. I'm sorry to hear that. Um, but yeah, episode 54 is a really interesting episode. I really enjoyed playing around with the time loop premise, and then just going for such a gut punch at the end, playing around with the idea of memory, where so much of it had been playing with the concept of time, and then the actual thing that it was playing around with was the concept of memory and self-perception, which is I'd say a major theme of the series, memory and self-perception, and playing around with the idea of context. Like, we do now have new additional context for 54 that we did not have at the time. 92 gave us a whole bunch more context for 54. And then we got even more context in 94 when we found out who the landlord actually is, and it throws everything he said into question. And we'll get a little bit more context on a few more things in some upcoming episodes. But I think that's probably a pretty good place to sort of wrap things up for now. Outside to just say, that whole gliding motion that the landlord did is purely inspired by an experience I had in 5th grade where a mime visited our elementary school. And I saw how they do the walking to mime going along like an escalator platform. And so that's what I was actually doing in that scene. I was just very gently, very slowly stepping forward and keeping my center of gravity, or keeping my center of mass at the same height above the floor, using actually my skills from fencing, which was something I did back in college, where you want to keep your center of mass at a very even height along the floor so that you're not losing your target when it comes to holding your sword. So I was really glad that I was able to use that little pair of skill sets to create a very unsettling motion for the landlord, combined with all the other ways in which he just tapped into my own personal neuroses. But I look forward to talking about him more next time. And hopefully next time, if this weekend goes well, maybe next time you guys will be telling me what your thoughts are on 95. We'll see. I hope to do like a little Jake Says Hi once I get the sequence done that I'm working on right now. But for tonight, I do need to hunker down and get to work on the rapid run through and deeper look for the next episode of Dino Fury. So keep an eye open for that in the morning. I hope to actually hit the usual 8:30 target in the morning. Last week it was just tough getting back in the swing of things, and the decreased amount of RAM on my computer threw me off a little bit. But I think I should be able to hit the usual 8:30 a.m. Release time for tomorrow's rapid run through and deeper look. So keep an eye open for that as we move towards the end of Dino Fury, the end of Power Reviews, and the end of the year. I'm very interested to see what next year brings, especially with Power Rangers moving on to Netflix, but those are all discussions for another time. In the meantime, let's wrap up with our remaining 3 equally non-controversial phrases. So, number 1, say it with me, chat. Love is love. Number 2, say it with me, chat. Trans rights are human rights. And number 3, say it with me, chat. Robots are cool. when they're being psychologically tortured. So, thank you again for joining me for yet another week. I look forward to seeing you all next week. And until next time, farewell, Ranger fans, and let the power protect you.